Namaskar and good evening. Welcome to this special briefing on the virtual summit between PM and Prime Minister of Vietnam. May I welcome Secretary East, Srimati Riva Gangli Das, who has joined us for this briefing. She is also joined by our Ambassador in Vietnam, Sri Pranay Verma. I'll begin by inviting Secretary East to make her opening remarks, following which we'll take your questions. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Anurag. Good evening to all of you. Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi just held a virtual summit with Prime Minister of Socialist Republic of Vietnam, His Excellency Nguyen Xuan Phuc. This capped a series of high-level exchanges with Vietnam this year, which witnessed visit of Vietnam's Vice President to India in February and the telephonic conversation between the two Prime Ministers in April to discuss the COVID-19 pandemic. The two Prime Ministers also met online during the 17th ASEAN-India Summit last month. India and Vietnam enjoy comprehensive strategic partnership, which has diversified across wide-ranging areas, from political engagement to economic and development partnership, defense and security, energy partnership, cultural exchanges, and people-to-people contacts. The discussions at today's virtual summit were productive. Both leaders exchanged views on wide-ranging bilateral, regional, and global issues. In this context, the two Prime Ministers adopted a joint vision for peace, prosperity, and people to guide the future development of India-Vietnam Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. To implement this vision, a plan of action for the period 2021-2023 was also signed between the two foreign ministers, which identify concrete follow-up actions. In addition, a number of documents were concluded and announcements made. You will be able to see the full list shortly on the MEA website. Some of our key domestic focus areas have also found resonance in the joint vision document as a roadmap for future development of India-Vietnam bilateral relations. Prime Minister's vision of self-reliant India or Atmanirbhar Bharat and human-centric globalization have been recognized as vital in upgrading our bilateral economic engagement with Vietnam. These complement with Vietnam's interest in building reliable, efficient, and resilient supply chains in partnership with us. Both sides agreed to also seek new horizons for partnership focusing on all segments of economy, including MSMEs and farming communities of the two countries. Prime Minister invited Vietnamese companies to invest in India and highlighted the urgent need for long overdue review of ASEAN-India Trade in Goods Agreement, AITIGA, as a concrete step towards revitalizing economic engagement between India and Vietnam as well as the larger ASEAN region. The two leaders also discussed how to leverage their respective focus on new technology and innovation to deliver good governance, people's empowerment, and sustainable and inclusive development. In this context, they recognized the synergy between India's Digital India mission and Vietnam's digital society vision. They also agreed to work together in areas such as peaceful uses of nuclear and space technologies, new developments in ICT, as well as cooperation in startups and smart cities. Prime Minister complimented Vietnam for its success in managing the COVID-19 and expressed support to Vietnam in its fight against the pandemic. The two leaders agreed to intensify our development partnership that will enable achievement of SDGs, develop capabilities to address climate change, and further augment our capacity building engagement through ITEC and Eat ITEC initiatives. In this context, Prime Minister offered to raise the annual number of quick impact projects in Vietnam. In a further demonstration of our development cooperation coinciding with the summit, 7 development projects completed with Indian grant in aid assistance of $1.5 million for the benefit of local community in Vietnam's Ninh Thuan province were handed over. In addition, our long-standing energy partnership was also highlighted during the summit discussions. This included not just our existing engagement in oil and gas sectors, but also our new focus on renewable energy. An MOU for partnership between our solar industry federations underlined this intent. In the area of defense cooperation, which is one of the key pillars of our comprehensive strategic partnership, the two leaders identified defense industry cooperation as a priority. The summit provided an opportunity to hand over one high-speed guard boat to Vietnam, launch of two other vessels manufactured in India, and keel-laying 7 vessels being manufactured in Vietnam under the $100 million defense line of credit extended by Government of India for high-speed guard boats manufacturing project with Vietnam. Both sides agreed to further intensify their defense industry collaboration, building on the Indian defense credit lines extended to Vietnam. An implementing arrangement on defense industry cooperation was also signed to this effect. A G2G agreement was signed under which India will extend a grant of $5 million to establish an IT infrastructure at the Army Software Park in Telecommunications University in Nha Trang. Both leaders also agreed to further institutionalize defense exchanges through mutual logistics support, regular ship visits, joint exercises, exchanges in military science and technology, information sharing, as well as cooperation in UN peacekeeping. As part of their discussion on security cooperation, both Prime Ministers also discussed closer engagement in dealing with traditional and non-traditional threats in cyber and maritime domain, terrorism, natural disasters, health security, water security, and transnational crimes. On terrorism, there was a strong convergence of views between the two leaders in promoting coordination to combat terrorism in all its forms and manifestations, including cross-border terrorism, terror financing networks, and safe havens. The two Prime Ministers underscored the importance of promoting closer people-to-people exchanges. Both leaders announced the launch of a joint project to publish an encyclopedia of India-Vietnam cultural and civilizational relations in time to mark the 50th anniversary of India-Vietnam diplomatic relations in 2022. Conservation of shared heritage was also highlighted as an important dimension of our emerging cultural and developmental ties. As you are aware, our Archaeological Survey of India team is working on restoration of charm temples in central Vietnam, where recently a 9th century AD monolithic shivling was discovered, highlighting our profound common civilizational heritage. Prime Minister agreed to extend Indian assistance for conservation work at 3 more heritage sites in Vietnam. In the hour-long discussions, Prime Minister expressed his heartfelt sympathies on the loss of lives due to flooding and landslides in several provinces of central Vietnam. India has shipped relief material to Vietnam, which will be reaching them later this week. During discussions on regional and multilateral issues, Prime Minister reiterated that Vietnam is an important pillar of our Act East policy as well as our Indo-Pacific vision. Prime Minister congratulated Vietnam for successfully steering the ASEAN presidency despite the disruptions of COVID-19. Both leaders agreed to explore practical cooperation based on convergences between our Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative and the ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific, which Vietnam subscribes to. We also agreed to enhance our development assistance to Vietnam's Mekong Delta region under the Mekong-Ganga Cooperation Framework, including in critical areas such as water security. Both leaders also spoke of the importance of promoting a rules-based order in the region, including by upholding international law, especially the UNCLOS. The leaders affirmed that a peaceful, stable, secure, free, open, inclusive, and rules-based region is in the common interest of all countries. Prime Minister stressed that the Code of Conduct negotiations on the South China Sea should not prejudice the interests of other countries in the region. There was a discussion in the context of both India and Vietnam concurrently serving as non-permanent members of the UN Security Council. Both Prime Ministers agreed that India and Vietnam should work closely to actively promote reform multilateralism, to make international organizations, including the UN Security Council, more representative, contemporary, and capable of dealing with current challenges. Vietnam reiterated its strong support for India's permanent membership in an expanded UN Security Council. Overall, it was a fruitful exchange between the two leaders, allowing them an opportunity to review the entire gamut of bilateral relations and set new directions for the future of this important partnership. This reaffirmation to enhance bilateral cooperation in all areas of engagement, support each other's national development, and strengthen cooperation against common global challenges provides an important basis to add new substance and momentum to our comprehensive strategic partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for that comprehensive statement. We've received a few questions which we have grouped as per themes. I'll start with the first cluster, which is on Indo-Pacific. Siddhant from Vion wants to know, is Vietnam keen to participate in the Indo-Pacific concept and the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative? Similar question from Nainima from the print and Madhurendra from News Nation. In fact, Madhurendra from News Nation also wants to know, was the Act East policy, in fact, I'll read out his question, Act East policy को सफल बनाने में वियतनाम किस तरह से सहायक साबित हो रहा है? Ma'am, would you like to respond to this first cluster?
Sure. Due to its geographical location and our strategic convergences, Vietnam remains an important pillar of India's Act East policy. We both share the fundamental principles of respect for international law and rules-based order. Partnership between India and Vietnam is an important factor of stability in the Indo-Pacific region. The two countries recognize that there are opportunities for practical cooperation in key areas which are in line with objectives and principles as stated in the ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific and India's Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative. The two sides agreed to explore new and practical collaboration to build capacities in blue economy, maritime security and safety, and marine environment and sustainable use of maritime resources, and maritime connectivity in order to ensure security and growth for all in the region.
Then I have a question from Jaiprakash from Dainik Jagran. Was there any talk on collaboration in the field of hydrocarbons? Can you give us some details? Shankar from India versus Disinformation also wants to know whether talks on the issue of oil exploration in the South China Sea.
I've touched upon it briefly in my statement, but as regards our energy partnership with Vietnam, the ongoing collaboration between our energy companies, including ONGC Videsh and Vietnamese companies, was discussed as an important part of our bilateral cooperation. Both India and Vietnam, as fast developing economies, need diverse energy resources for national development. This includes both fossil fuel based energy as well as renewable energy.
Madhurendra from News Nation, he has two questions. चीन और वियतनाम के कन्फ्लिक्ट को इंडिया किस तरह से दिखता है? स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनर होने के नाते भारत वियतनाम के साथ क्या भूमिका निभाएगा? He also asks, भारत और वियतनाम साउथ चाइना सी में अपने कॉपरेशन को आगे किस तरह बढ़ाएंगे? Similar question from Siddhant. He says both India and Vietnam have seen aggressive Chinese action. He wants to know, was this discussed? If yes, any plan to jointly deal with the issue?
As I mentioned in my statement, the two prime ministers exchanged views on wide-ranging bilateral, regional and global issues. During the discussion, we shared our perspectives on emerging geopolitical situation in the region and globally. I've already given details of the discussions held on South China Sea in my statement, including our shared emphasis on rules-based order and respect for international law, notably the UNCLOS, as part of our overall approach towards a free, open, peaceful, stable, and inclusive Indo-Pacific region.
Then there are a set of questions which are on defense cooperation. I'll summarize them. Whether India and Vietnam discussed the $500 million LOC, provided to Vietnam for the purchase of defense products, and specifically whether the export of BrahMos missiles and other armaments were discussed. These questions are from Sumant Sharma, Sumit Sharma from Asia Times, Ranjit Kumar from Rakshat News, Shankar from India vs. Disinformation, Sridhar from Asian Age, Siddhant from Beyond, and Nanima from The Print.
As I said in my opening statement, defense cooperation is one of the key pillars of our comprehensive strategic partnership, and the two leaders identified defense industry cooperation as a priority. Defense industry cooperation has indeed emerged as an important area. Our two defense lines of credit extended to Vietnam so far are important tools in promoting cooperation in this area. The signing of the implementation arrangement for defense industry cooperation provides a further framework for future engagements between our defense industries. Our overall approach to defense supplies to Vietnam is based on Vietnam's requirements. As regards training, capacity building is an important aspect of our defense partnership with Vietnam. Vietnamese defense personnel are regularly invited to India under our ITEC and other capacity building programs.
The last question that I have, ma'am, is from Siddhant. How much focus was on resilient supply chains? Is Vietnam keen on joining the India-led initiative on this issue?
India and Vietnam are important trade and economic partners. Both countries have been affected by disruptions in supply chain due to the COVID-19 pandemic. During the discussions between our leaders, both sides identified building reliable, efficient and resilient supply chains as an important part of our post-pandemic revival strategy.
I don't see any further questions. So let me thank Secretary East and Ambassador for joining us for this special briefing, and this concludes the briefing.
Thank you, Anurag.
Thank you, ma'am.